Hey everyone, I'm Pion and welcome to Pion's Perspective. Today I'm gonna talk about the game design pillars of due process. If you don't know what due process is, I covered the game before on this channel and I recommend checking out the video over there. I've linked on the other side of the screen. Today I want to talk about the game design goals the developers of this game are aiming for, or at least what I think those goals are. This video is based on a Reddit thread I made a few months ago, and I decided it's a good time to produce this video now because we just got a new blog post with a bunch of shiny new gameplay clips, which you can see in the background here. Unfortunately, it's not that much footage, so we'll probably repeat over the course of this video. And also there's some weird green artifacting going on, which seems to be a problem with the developer's recording software. I can't fix that, so I'm a little sorry for that. Anyway, as mentioned, this video is based on a Reddit thread. Unfortunately, the developers never actually responded to that thread, so everything you hear in this video is my guesswork. This is what I figured from reading all the blog posts and all the comments by the developers on the subreddit. And this is what I identified as the game design pillars for the due process. So let's get started, shall we? The first one is what I call communicate or die. The developers actually stress this a lot. They mentioned this on multiple occasions. Basically, the idea is they want you to force you by game design to use the in-game voice chat. If you don't, you will die and you will lose and you will not have fun. That's the idea anyway. This is pretty hard to achieve because, well, how do you do that? You have to force them, you have to force communication, and you have to make sure that if they don't communicate, they will lose most likely and die most likely. And that's pretty tricky to do, and B, pretty risky, because let's be frank, most people in first-person competitive shooters are not actually using the voice chat a lot or at all, and that's a shame because at least I think those games are at its best if you actually communicate with your team. So I think this is a pretty cool goal, but it's risky because if people don't want to communicate and you force them to, they might just not play the game. So yeah, as mentioned, I like the idea, but it's pretty hard to achieve and it's pretty risky as well. So we're gonna see how this turns out when the game actually becomes available. Okay, the second one is plan or die. This relies on the first one because planning involves communication. And the idea here is that planning is more important, like your strategy is more important than your skill, like your aiming skill, how good you are at shooting pixels on the screen. So if you don't have a plan or a bad plan and your opponents have a good one and they execute it decently, then no amount of headshot skills or whatever is gonna help you. It doesn't matter that you're the better shot as opposed to your opponents. If they have the better plan, they will win and you will lose. That's the idea, and that's pretty cool because, well, let's be honest, I'm not a good shot in FPS games. So yeah, I prefer the planning thing and the tactics and stuff like that. So I really like this, and I'm looking forward to a game that actually achieves this because most of the games don't. And I think the randomly generated maps actually helps in this because one of the reasons why, well, not necessarily aim, but like more experienced players always beat newer players, even though the newer players might have the better tactics, is map knowledge. I actually talked about this in depth in another video. So let's make this short. Basically, if the maps are randomly generated, there is no skill like map knowledge. So it is more important to have like general tactical knowledge and have good plans and win this way. Okay, so let's jump to the next point, which is predictability. One important thing for due process is to be to guess what your opponents are doing. The whole I think, you think, that I think thing. So this whole bluffing thing where you think about what your opponents will do and what they think you will do and how they will react to what they think you will do and how you think what they will do, what you will do, and you get the idea. So the whole thing about that. In order to make those predictions, the game has to be somewhat predictable. Not 100%, but at least somewhat. If it becomes too unpredictable, this doesn't work anymore. And the developers actually talked about this very in depth in a blog post about movable cover. They had in one beta or in one alpha build, they had movable cover, so the defenders could move things around in the room and create cover the way they wanted it. And playtesting turned out to be quite boring, at least for the attackers, because the attackers could not really predict what the opponents would do at all, and it made it really hard for them to get an interesting planning phase. So the developers decided to scrap this feature in favor of predictability. Okay, next point is only meaningful choices. This is actually a pretty generic thing. This should be in every game. Like, this should be a goal for every game. If you have a choice, for example, choose a weapon, choose a tool, choose a way to enter a room, all the options should be viable in some circumstances, and there should never be a super obvious choice or a super obvious choice not to pick, because this makes interesting choices, and interesting choices make fun gameplay. So this is a pretty generic thing, but the developers of this game actually mentioned this quite a bit on Reddit and the blog and the development blog. Sorry. So I figured it's pretty important to them, and that's good because, as mentioned, this makes good gameplay. So I figured I would put it in this list. The next one is kind of generic as well. It's called it's what I call minimalistic design. I don't think this is the official term for it. The idea is to only use features in your game that are absolutely necessary to fulfill your vision of the game, to make the core gameplay fun. This is something that a lot of indie game developers do, but most AAA games don't. So in a AAA game, you usually have a bunch of extra features and gimmicks and little things that you could easily remove from the game without actually destroying the core gameplay. And the developers of Due Process and a lot of other indie games as well decided to go the opposite route and only take those features which are really necessary, absolutely required to fulfill their vision of the game, to make the core gameplay fun. And I kind of like this approach if you have a really good idea of what your vision is. If you really know, I want this gameplay, I want the game to be this way, and I want this cool experience, and you have this in your head all laid out, then I think this is a really good approach, because you don't have to fill the game, and you can create this really cool focused vision and make this vision fun. And that brings us to the last point, and in my opinion, the most important pillar, game design pillar for Due Process, which is the fantasy of room clearing, or the power fantasy rather of room clearing. So this intense moment where you breach, bang, and clear, and the plan you just planned in the last few minutes either gets completely destroyed or executed perfectly. Like this really intense, these really intense few seconds, which we know from movies and stuff like that, and some single-player games pull this off as well. But I think the developers of this game really had this one idea in mind when they came up with the idea of Due Process, is having this power fantasy of room clearing in a competitive multiplayer game, because I don't know any game that pulls this off properly, and the designers of this game really want this to happen. There's a whole blog post about this, and I will link all the things in the description below, by the way, so you can check it out there, where they talk about how they want to achieve this vision and want this to happen, want this power fantasy to be the core gameplay loop of this game, and all the other goals are designed to make the game fulfill this dream, this vision of the room clearing power fantasy. And I really like this as well. I'm a big fan of special operations and room clearing situations, stuff like that. I'm not sure why actually, but I just like the idea. So yeah, I don't know. I really like. Well, this is one of the main reasons I'm so hyped for this game, because this is the core vision of this game, is this really intense situation, which I like a lot. So anyway, that's my list of game design pillars for of Due Process. And if you agree or disagree, feel free to comment below and tell me, what do you think are important pillars of game design goals for this game? Am I wrong on some points, or do you have others in mind? Or do you agree with me? And if you liked or disliked the video, feel free to press the like or dislike button below. And if you liked it, consider subscribing, because I'm definitely going to post more Due Process videos later down the line. And I'll also do some other kind of neat stuff. At least I like what I do, because that's why I'm doing it, right? That makes. But anyway, let's wrap this video up. Thanks a lot for watching. I'm TH Pion. Have fun and see you next time.